All right, so if you've done your investigation, you want to see if you did it right. So coming back here, if I plug in 0 for C, that means I would have 600 pounds of CO2 just being used by the SUV. So I'm going to divide that by 1.25. And so that means I could drive 480 miles just using the SUV. That is not very much. So then flip that around. If I have 0 for the SUV, how far can I drive my car? So 6,000 divided by 0.75, and I can get 800 miles just using the car. I don't know how they do that with kids in youth sports. Anyways, now to pick another point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick 300 for the car. So I'm going to say we have 0.75 times 300 plus 1.25s. Now I could have picked any number for this whatsoever. It wouldn't have mattered. All right, so 300 times 0.75. So that's 225 miles plus 1.25 times the SUV miles. Still has to be less than or equal to 600. All right, so I'm going to subtract 225 from both sides. So I get 375 is greater than or equal to 1.25s. So now I'm going to divide that by 1.25. And I will get, so I said 300 for cars, and I get 300 for the SUV. Look at that. That's quite a coincidence. Obviously, we could pick any number for C, or we could have picked any number for S. It doesn't matter. And just go ahead and use this process to solve. Now, since I have 3 points, I'm going to use those 3 points. I'm going to take my little, and I'm going to copy it. So when I go to the other page, I can paste it. So here's my beautiful graph. I'm going to paste my little table back in here. Obviously, it's directly on my graph, so I'll slide my graph over a bit. All right, so car miles is 0. Okay, that's right here. And 480. So here's 500. So 480 is going to be just a little bit under that. 800, 0. Right here. Let's add another point, 300, 300, and I like that point a lot because that's easy to graph. And then all I have to do is connect the dots. All right, and so there I have my graph. This graph gives me all the solutions for driving exactly, or producing exactly 600 pounds of CO2 per month. So now we need to take this graph and turn it into an inequality. So I'm going to pull this back. It means I'm going to have to remake the graph, but it's not like that last graph was super arduous. So 300, 300, 800, 0. There we go. So the first thing we have to ask ourselves is, in our expression, do we have an open or a closed line? And remember that an open line means that the line cannot be part of the solution set. A closed line can. Well, it can be equal, so we're going to have a closed line. It's going to be a solid line. So then let's pick a point. that is not on that boundary line. Let's pick 0, 0 because that's really easy. And if I don't drive the car and I don't drive the SUV, will I stay under 600 pounds of CO2? And the answer is clearly yes. So therefore, every point inside this region is going to satisfy my desire of having exactly or less than 600 pounds of CO2. Not too bad. Let's take a look at our minivan versus our SUV. A little story about a minivan. So my father lost his job or downsizing when he was in his 50s and couldn't, Social Security doesn't start for him until he's 65. Now it's 68, which is kind of a bummer, I think. But so he had to find a way to make money, and no one really wants to hire a late 50-year-old because they're expensive, and they're expensive. So he wasn't able to find a job. So he ended up being a professional gambler and driving out for, so he lived in Ohio. He'd drive to Nevada, gamble to make enough money for the next couple months, and then drive back. But to save money, he would live inside a minivan that he converted to a little camper thing. Kind of cool yet embarrassing. Yeah, and yes, he actually did make a living for several years counting cards in Vegas. That is a true story. All right, so 500 pounds, and we don't want to go over 500 pounds, and our hybrid produces 0.2 pounds or 0.5 pounds of CO2. Our minivan is 1.2 pounds per mile. So same basic structure of the equation. Let's find the zeros. So if I have 0 miles for the hybrid, and I only drive the minivan, like I'm driving out to Vegas to go play blackjack. He said it's horribly depressing. And having been in a casino, I think it would be pretty depressing to actually try to make a living in there. All right, so you get 417, we're gonna round that to 17 miles. If I drive 0 miles on the minivan, well, I just double it. I'll get 1,000 miles on my hybrid. So my hybrid is right here. My minivan is just over that 400 mark. And then connect the dots. And we can equal 500, so it's a solid line, a closed line. And clearly, if I don't drive the car at all, or the minivan at all, I'll have less than 500 pounds of CO2, so I'd be shading down to the bottom. And that's how we do it. That is the investigation in a nutshell. So now it is time for you to do your exit ticket. Bonne chance.